Welcome. Unholy Mo, and I have Mr. Atheist with me today. I'm going
What
to interview, talk to him a little bit about his past and what brought him to atheism, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
um, I guess my first question would be, I mean, I do know a little bit about your past, but if anybody's watching that don't,
hmm
were you ever religious growing up?
Oh yeah, man. Hardcore. Hardcore Mormon.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And what what planted the seed in your head to lean toward atheism?
So it's hard to say, man, because there were definitely things that happened early on that I started to suspect like things weren't what they seemed to be. But the thing that sticks out the most was around 14 or 15. I was in a fast and testimony meeting, which is the first Sunday of every month. Anybody can get up and like give sermons and talks and basically just say how much they love God and Mormonism and shit. And it was so we were right at the beginning of that meeting, and this woman gets up and she ends up giving this really long talk, and she mentions things like that there was this presence in her house and it was like playing with their kids and like doing chores, and then she figured out that there was like a homeless man secretly living somewhere in her house, and how like they still got rid of him, but like he had been such a blessing. And she's talking about the blessing of this guy who had broken in and was living in like her crawl space or something, what a blessing she was. And she's crying, and I'm just sitting there like the whole time being like, oh my God. And so as she really starts to cry, I look around and other people are crying, and other people are like, oh, that is so, and they like clearly are touched. And that was the first time I went, oh, this could be bullshit. In my head,
Right.
I remember even using the word bullshit. And that was
And
the first
how old were
time.
you when how old were you when that happened?
I mean, that was the first time I acknowledged it could be bullshit. And that was around 14 or 15. There were other things that were like little doubts, like how I was masturbating and none of the people who were supposed to be able to like get revelation about all these evil things I was doing ever seemed to pick up on it. So there were other things, but that was the first time that I was like, oof, this could be bullshit.
So what was the catalyst that led you to, I mean, all the way into atheism then?
Science education, mostly like learning about evolution. Finally in college taking my first biology class because I didn't have to in high school, and ended up doing like astronomy as my fucking like a science elective that I had to do. And so I ended up taking the first and learning about evolution and seeing how elegant and beautiful it is and how much it works. And just the more that I started to go with like things that are true, you can figure out, you can prove, or at least you can see what else you need to learn, and that the truth has nothing to hide. And the more that that got in my mind, the more I realized like the world looks more like a world without a God than with a God. There was also an ex who got me along the way too. She was non-Mormon. She was Christian when we first started dating, and we both kind of became atheists around the same time, which is funny because now I'm pretty sure she's like a Wiccan or something, but whatever. I hope she's happy.
Yeah, yeah. Teach their own.
Yeah, kind of. I have a whole
But
video about why too.
I don't know
Go
if you
ahead.
knew this about me, but my fiance is a devout Pentecostal, and her dad's a pastor. And believe it or
Ooh.
not, you would think it would be rough, but I mean, they know I'm an atheist. I try going to church a few times with them to make them happy, but
Would she
it's just
agree to an on-screen discussion with me, you think? Not a debate, but
oh,
me
I
asking her
don't know.
questions?
I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm not really. I mean, I know she believes in God, but I
Right.
don't know if she's as devout as her parents are.
Right, right. That's
I
fine.
think she does it more out of loyalty because one brother's totally backslid and the other one's homosexual. So you know how they feel about that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Whatever level she's at, if she still retains any kind of. So I've just started doing these talking with theist videos based on doing a lot of it being I want to try out these street epistemology tactics as opposed to doing like the hard debates and discussions. So anybody who's watching, if they want to reach out and they have a believer friend that is either very firm or it could be weak in their belief who would want to do a discussion, their face doesn't actually have to be on screen. We can record it and put a still up. in place or something, I'd prefer a face-to-face discussion.
Right.
But the first one so far went nice. The person didn't receive any hate. All the comments were like, this was a really nice discussion. So if anybody,
you have that personality, you don't seem like, you know, a lot of Christians feel attacked. They feel, I mean, they have every right to feel attacked because people go in, and once an ad hom gets thrown at them, then they just unload, you know, and that doesn't make for very good discussion.
You haven't seen me when I'm angry and in debate, though. I can go full dick bag.
Oh, I can too. I mean, I lose my shit sometimes, but I try to stay civil because it's hard to have a discourse. I mean, because they're going to shut down as soon as you start yelling. They're shutting down. You know, I mean,
for sure.
Or even cursing for that matter. I mean, I try to watch my mouth when I'm trying to talk to a theist.
For sure.
So, this is probably a big one. In what way? Well, first of all, did it take you a while to come up with courage to come out to your parents? I mean, and how has atheism affected your life in any negative ways?
Okay, so the first side, I was secretly atheist for a while. And I knew I was full on atheist somewhere in the 2021 range. But then at 22, I was still hiding it from my family because none of my family had left the church. And I have, at present, because of a new adoption, I now have 12 siblings. At that time, I probably had 10. Or it would have been 9 at that time, I think. But a big Mormon family. And this is like, when you're in Mormonism, it becomes a huge part of your identity. It becomes just a huge part of fucking everything.
Well, the church runs everything in Mormonism, don't they? I mean, home life and everything.
Well, yeah, to some degree. But what I'm more talking about is on the social side, like your friends are Mormon. You often work for Mormons. I mean, I remember I was working at Sears for a manager who was Mormon, and every now and then he'd be like, haven't seen you at church in a while. And I'm like, oh, you know, right. Anyway, it was actually while I was working there at the Sears that my brother and I got in a fight, and he was one of only 2 of my siblings who I had disclosed it to. We got in an argument about stuff. I didn't like the way his wife had been treating me and talking to me. I expressed that, and he, in revenge for me, quote unquote, disrespecting his wife, which means saying anything that disagrees or could be possibly, went and told on me. You know, we're fucking, at this time I'm 22, he's 25, and he's tattling. And so he goes and he tattles that I'm an atheist to my parents. And it ended up not being a big deal. Honestly, like my dad thinks he kind of knew, obviously upset my mom. What was more annoying is them telling my grandma, who was pretty much on her deathbed. I mean, it's one of those things, like my grandma also believed in essential oils. I wasn't going to tell her that's all a bunch of wooey bullshit.
So they couldn't have not told your grandma, or do you think that would have been lying by omission to them?
I think my mom told my grandma because she wanted to, not because of like any morality, but because she wanted to, because she wanted.
That's shitty of her, kind of, dude.
I wasn't glad she did it at all. And I remember even saying, this didn't need to happen. And my mom saying something back, well, I thought you were proud to be atheist. And I was like, that has nothing to do with wanting my grandma to die as peacefully as possible.
Right. That's what I was getting at, you know? Yeah. Because I was in the nursing field for 18 years, and like I've seen a lot of selfish family members do a lot of they've said rotten shit to. I mean, these people are defenseless and on their deathbed, and that just really grinds my gears.
And so coming out to my parents, though, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. In the years to come, I'd have 2 older brothers who also leave the church. And while I think I planted seeds and I definitely helped them as far as being a supportive brother that was there, for the most part, their journeys out were entirely of their own. Which is another thing with my family, where it was like, he's infecting minds. I'm sure to most of my family, they think I like him. they think that I tricked these two guys. Who Jason, my older brother, who is left, is extremely smart. We often joke about which of the two of us is smarter because we both think ourselves are. He's also
Your
extremely
brothers.
dependent, and he definitely the only real support I helped with as far as getting him out was him having a family member that, which by the way, that is a big thing. I wish I had a family member, a sibling. But like this idea that somehow I could have tricked him into it and used my sly talking to trick him out of Mormonism is absurd, especially because in the family, I was always the black sheep. Nobody of my siblings ever respected me until after becoming an atheist. And so this idea that that I tricked him out of it is just stupid.
Where does your birth fall in the middle of the brood? Or are you the baby, or the oldest, or you in the middle?
So it's hard because it's like I
know some are adopted, but I mean your biological brothers and sisters. So, I would say
of the biological brothers and sisters, I have 4 older biological brothers and I have 2 younger biological sisters. On top of that, I have an older adopted sister, and then I have 3 additional adopted brothers that are younger than me and 2 additional that are younger than me. So pretty dead center in the actual family dynamic. But additionally, everybody in our family has another member of the family who's within 1 to 2 years of their age, whereas I have a 3-year gap on one side of me and a 4-year gap on the other. So as far as the way people like partnered up and cliques within the families formed, I was always isolated.
Yeah, because of your age. I'm actually the 3rd child, but I'm 16 years apart, or 14 years apart from my brother, 16 from my sister.
Yeah,
so I was raised as an only child, pretty much. You know,
the span of ages in my family, in my siblings, my oldest sister is like 43 years, I think, older than my youngest sister.
Wow.
Yeah, our sibling age range is huge.
That's quite a difference. And I was gonna ask, do most Mormon families have quite large families?
Yes, but by large, it's probably, I'd say the average Mormon family has like 4 to 5 kids, but they definitely like teach that you should have as big a family as you can handle, which I think is a mistake. And I've even said it to my parents. Our family was too big. I should have been an abortion. Definitely, I should have been. But I'm not for postpartum abortions or post.
Right.
You don't want to have the abortion after they're born. So I'm not going to fix that now. But yes, lots of Mormon families have families that are not only big, but they are too big.
And do they what's the word I'm looking for? Do they discourage contraceptives of any source?
No, not at all. Birth control is 100% acceptable. They discourage not contraceptives, but they discourage abortion.
What about a day after pill? Would that be considered abortion to them?
No, day after pill would be fine by them. So the funny thing with day after pill, though, is to them, like a day after pill, you wouldn't buy it if you were single, for example. The day after pill, it's more like, so contraceptives are fine within the confines of marriage. Yeah, contraceptives are fine within the confines of marriage, but like we were taught growing up, don't buy condoms, you'll be tempted to use them, which is why my brother ended up getting his now wife pregnant before they were married. Literally the first time he ever had sex. I don't. So morning after pill, it would be like, why would anybody need one? Because a married couple should already have a birth control regimen going, and the pill is fine and IUDs are fine. So why? It's not something you would hear them talk a lot about because it would seem such an obscure need to them.
Okay. I was just curious about that. I mean, because I know there's a lot of weird rituals in the temple. I was going to get to some of them actually. Like, what is it with magic undergarments, and are them made from the forbidden fruit of the loom?
If you don't mind, I'm going to real quick respond to Casey Atheist question. Okay. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad, my family definitely got a lot of support from our grandparents as well. But my dad was a mall manager. I don't want to go too far into it. I'm not going to try and dox these guys either. But anyway, give me the question again. What's with the magic underwear?
Oh, yeah.
So I never donned the magic underwear myself, but I grew up around it. My parents both wore it. My grandparents all wore it. They're called temple garments. And what it is after your endowments. So it's basically, and I don't mean to like downplay it because it is weird, but it's basically a giant yarmulke. So the way the yarmulke is supposed to remind you that celestial bodies above you, wearing the garments, it's both like a covenant that it's representative of a covenant, and it's something you have to do because sometimes the things you have to do for God are hard, or the things they take work, but they're supposed to be a constant reminder. Even a lot of Mormons know that, like, the stories of like, this was such a blessing because this guy was in a plane crash and everything burned up except for anywhere the temple garments were touching. And it's like, that's the blessing. He died, but the parts of his body that don't include his face were preserved. It's a fucking weird blessing.
It makes more sense. I mean, it's just like a rosary to a Catholic or a yarmulke to a Jew. There's all religions, I guess, have their own little symbols or traditions. Do you have to perform a special rite to get your right to wear your magic underwear?
Yeah, so that's after the age of 18, usually in preparation to go on a mission, you get something called the endowments, and it's usually done right after you get the Melchizedek priesthood if you're a man. Women, it's just done. It's just something that you do. A lot of them wait until right before they're going to get married. But with men, it's usually tied into them going on their mission. And so you go in and you do the endowments and you learn all the secret handshakes to get into heaven. That's what the whole, for straight Sith male, I assume that's what you're talking about, the sheets with the hole in it. They're actually like curtains, and otherwise I don't know what you're talking about, unless you're implying that Mormons are in the KKK. I don't know. But and you go and you wear these silly hats and you make these stupid gestures and you learn about things that are not scientific, like the origin of the world and how Adam and Jesus created the earth under God's command and all this stuff that's just very bullshit. But and after you've done that, from then on, you have a temple recommend number that will allow you to order and purchase temple garments.
Okay. It sounds like a cross between the Masons and religion almost. It's kind of weird.
The temple. So if you actually look into the history, the temple ritual literally is a Mason ritual. It's the exact same. I mean, it's the same hand signs. They've had to get rid of some, like the ones that imply like cut my throat if I share these secrets. They got rid of some of those, but it literally is a Masonic ritual. The whole thing.
That's crazy. Okay, now I want to ask about you don't hear many Mormons talk about this. This is something they like to broadcast. What about Heavenly Mother?
Yeah. So not only do you not hear much about it, there's not much about it. So the thing they'll say is that God is an actual man, as God is, man once, or as man is, God once was, as God is, man may become. So the idea is what we're going through now, God went through it in his own right at one point. God would have had his own God, but because of the commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, that God is totally irrelevant to us. But he would still have that relationship with them. And basically, because we know that because Mormons think they know that they're going to be sealed to their wife and become gods in their own right, that God would then also by necessity have a wife. And the excuses they use is that she's so holy that we can't talk about it. Now, one thing that they also won't talk about is God a polygamist? Because there are lots of polygamists who are going to supposedly be in heaven with all of their wives. So it may not even be, if you go with Mormon doctrine, one heavenly mother. It may be many. And so there's just nothing about it. It's basically like we know that wives are included in our becoming gods, and that God is the same as God was the way we are now at one point and will be that way. And so we must be, I mean, they believe he is a physical man, a resurrected man, but a physical human being.
It does, and they believe God has a physical body, right?
Yeah.
And does he live on Kolob? What is the deal with Kolob?
So basically,
is Kolob his planet?
Yes. I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah. That's whereas heaven, like
you all get your own planet, right?
You'll technically, once you become a god, you'll be able to have your own universe, and within that universe, you would have a home base, and that's your planet.
Oh, so you become an actual god, so you can create humans of your own to
Yeah,
populate your planet and all
you will
that.
become perfect as our God supposedly is. And yeah,
Oh,
you'll have to organize intelligences into spirits because they believe that we've all always existed forever, but we used to only exist as intelligences. And then God's basically created us into spirits.
right.
Um, so you'll organize your own intelligences into spirits, and you'll have to do your own plan of salvation and give them bodies in your own way. And hopefully your way won't include a barbaric act of human sacrifice like our God decided.
Okay, and they believe in hell in the same sense that other Christians do.
No, not at all, actually. So they believe in three levels of heaven: telestial, terrestrial, and celestial. In the Telestial Kingdom, the lowest one, pretty much everybody can go there. Hitler will be in the Telestial Kingdom, and it's still supposed to be a very beautiful heavenly place. The Terrestrial, that one's murky, but it's better. It's like good people who could never make it all the way to perfection, but that they're good people. The Celestial Kingdom will be people who made it to perfection, have a heavenly wife, and those will be the people who can become actual and complete total gods, because in the Celestial Kingdom you can achieve what's called exaltation. As far as hell goes, there's this thing called, so there's two things that people think is hell. There's spirit prison, which is where if you weren't baptized Mormon, you go to wait for someone to be baptized on your behalf, and that's why they do baptisms for the dead. That's spirit prison, and some people think that's what they're referring to with hell. Then there's outer darkness, and basically if you deny God even after you've met him, and you basically, it's almost to the level of you have to say, I don't want to be a part of God's plan, you will be cast out to be basically a you'll still exist, but you'll just be isolated and alone for literally eternity.
That's crazy.
It's all stupid.
Are there any other crazy Mormon things that Mormons
Tons.
prefer not to talk about? You want to say a few?
Yeah,
You don't have to tell me them all, obviously.
They're not going to talk about anything in the temple. There's also a lot of things that are both doctrine and not doctrine. There's enough obscurity that they'll say when it's a problem, they'll say it's not doctrine, but when it helps, they'll teach it as doctrine. So things like most Mormons believe if you pay your tithing, you'll be met with financial success, or at least you'll figure out your finances. And they'll at fast and testimony meetings tell all kinds of stories about, I paid my tithing and then I received this rebate that I forgot about, and that was the exact amount that I needed to pay my water bill, or something as stupid as like, I found enough money to buy milk because I paid my 10% tithing. But when you talk about like, what about these people who it didn't work out for? And the church has their own welfare program so they can avoid some of those things. But then it's all, I remember I asked the question that even bothered my dad for a while, and he's just gone with life is but a vapor. But I was like, so the people who are just poor and dying of starvation in Africa, the reason why God won't help them out is because they're not paying tithing. And I remember like that bugged me, it bugged my dad, and it bugged, and basically the answer I eventually got from my dad was, yeah, that's what's happening, but it's not like as big a deal as you realize, because this life is but a vapor, and in the grand scheme of the eternity that we're going to be going into and approaching, you're not going to have to, like, it's not that big a deal.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to ask you. Go ahead and you tell another story while I try to remember what I was going to ask you.
So yeah, temple shit, getting baptized for the dead. Patriarchal blessings are basically divination. I mean, it's literally like basically psychics giving you a giant horoscope. As in your teenage years, you will get a patriarchal blessing, which I didn't do because I believed in it and I thought the guy would for sure know I was masturbating. But basically, it tells you, like, first of all, they tell you what tribe of Israel you're from, but it has nothing to do with genetics. It just has to do with whatever they're feeling. And almost everybody put into one of two. So it's not that big of a thing. And they can find out where your parents were, and they'll just put you in the same one as your parents. Then they basically go on to do like a psychic reading for the future. And they will, and it's really obscure things. Like nothing is very specific. It's just what psychics do, where it feels so specific and personal that you will figure out a way that it fits. And they'll even teach you unapologetically, like, if you don't understand, that just means you haven't worked hard enough to figure out why that applies to you. And so, yeah, it's it's while they themselves pretend to be against all these dark arts things, these practices come from an origin of very superstitious families in the early part of the church, like how Joseph Smith believed in seeing with rocks, rock seeing or whatever it was called, crystal seeing and stuff,
seer
and
stones.
he would treasure hunt with these rocks and shit. So it's like, yeah, it's really dumb. Casey atheist, yeah. So baptism for the dead. That's so you can get everybody out of spirit prison and they can start learning the truth. Which, by the way, fun fact: not only did they, in what I think is an offensive gesture, on multiple occasions have they baptized Anne Frank by proxy, they also baptized Hitler by proxy. So like nobody's off limits apparently.
That's funny. A Jew is now a Mormon and a psycho killer. That's great.
Yeah, and a Catholic anti-Semite, both Mormons.
Oh, I was gonna ask you. I know that that the Mormon Church wouldn't allow blacks in until the 70s. Yep. Now, do you think racism is dead in the Mormon Church?
No,
or is
absolutely
it just
not.
Covered up.
So first of all, just look at their quote unquote general authorities. They just got their first two like really diverse apostles, and they're not all that diverse anyway. They speak with a bit of an accent. But I mean, the church is largely controlled by and represented by white dudes. As far as like, there are still people who go, yeah, we don't know why the curse was put on so long, but black people were cursed because they're just the descendants of Ham, which is really a fucking absurd belief, because their first article or second article of faith is, we believe that men will be punished for their own sins and not for Adam's transgression. Basically the idea that you cannot have anything like original sin. And yet this is so that, I mean, that the curse is in its own right a different kind of original sin. So so they have very contradictory, stupid beliefs. There are lots of people who believe that, for example, Cain is still alive, and that was the curse that he was put on him, and that's who Bigfoot is, because he was deformed and made dark and furry, basically.
That's hilarious.
And one of their prophets actually in a book basically made that case without ever saying Bigfoot, but described meeting Cain and what he looks like now, and so that's where they've gone off on the.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
So what do Mormons think about? What did they think after the book of Abraham was translated and they found out that it had nothing to do with?
They just lie to themselves.
Said. It's just cognitive dissonance in their head. Then
and it's basically, no, that means anything that is that wrong, it means the science is wrong. I brought it up with my dad, and my dad was like, we don't even know if that thing was what they're talking about, if the translation was wrong, because the originals burned up. But then they actually went and found the originals that they hadn't burned up, and they found that character for character in the same sequence, his translation guide that he had came up with matched the sequence of this papyri that they found. And so that actually was wrong. It actually was that they translated it, and they translated it wrong. And so now there's all kinds of apologetics like, well, the papyri he had, but that wasn't necessarily what he was translating from. And what's important was the God's message came through the papyri, not what it actually blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's all. It's all.
So it's just. Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. Now, I was going to ask you. I know there's obviously a hierarchy in the church.
Yeah.
Like, are there like literally like the lowest? Is there like seating arrangements and like?
No. So
how do you become like an elder and then to become like? I mean, there's like a board of like prophets or elders, or there's like one prophet, right?
Yeah. So you have a prophet, and the prophet has counselors. That's considered the top. Then you have the quorum of the 12 apostles. That's what follows. And then you have other general authorities like the bishop for the whole church and shit like that. And then under that, you have what are called the quorum of the 70. And these are people who are also general authorities that go out and are like the nation's overseers. And they all have like regions that they oversee. Then you have locally stake presidents, which is kind of like having a county, like all the Mormons in this whole bigger area are under that individual. Under that, you have a bishop, which would be actually the guy in charge of the individual congregation that meet at a certain time. So you do have an assigned time based on where you lived. under that, you have just like the individual teachers and stuff. As far as becoming an elder, it's a complicated thing because elder refers to a few things. Elder can be a prophet, elder can be a missionary, and elder can be just a person with the Melchizedek priesthood. They're an elder first, and then some of them become high priests, which was kind of meaningless. So becoming an elder is something like that succession as far as the priesthood goes. If you are a man, at 12, you'll become a deacon. At 14, you'll become a teacher. You don't teach anything. This is what it's called. 16, you'll become a priest. 18, you'll become an elder. And then if you have a calling later on in life that requires a calling, being what they call like being bishop, being a Sunday school teacher, whatever, that requires you to be a high priest, you'll become a high priest later in life.
Okay. Now, is our missionary, I mean, I know they try to encourage everybody to go on missionary work.
Yeah, well,
is that like RTCO to become to further yourself in the church? I mean, how do they actually further themselves? By ass kissing? I mean, how is it accomplished?
So
nepotism? I mean,
sorry, give me the question one more time, because I think I was taking it one way in my head, and that wasn't what you were asking.
My first statement was, or question was, is missionary work kind of like RTCO, almost like getting them ready for furthering themselves in the church? Because they got to become elders to become missionaries. I mean,
not really, because every able-bodied man isn't just asked to do it. It's a commandment. You have to go on a mission if you are quote unquote able. So yes, in a way, but honestly, I think the number one function that serves is to indoctrinate. Once you go on a 2-year mission, it's way harder to let go, because now you are so far in that admitting it means admitting a significant part of your life from 19 to 21, or now 18 to 20, but anywhere in that period.
Yeah.
That was a total waste of your life.
Right.
And that actually what you were doing was wrong and bad. So, but as far as like prep, like, sure, you're going to see people who come back from that are the ones that are like the super faithful and became really good at bearing their testimonies and shit. And those are going to be the guys who more often become bishops later on and such. But it's not as though the path is already laid ahead of you. They're just mostly interested in shoring up their numbers as quickly as possible.
And so a lot of them go grudgingly?
Oh, so you don't find out about it because you're supposed to, like, Mormons are really good at faking enthusiasm, but you find out after, especially the people who leave that are like, I hated my mission. I hated going. I didn't want to go, but I had to go because it was expected of me. There's no way I was going to talk back against it. Then you'd have people who would come home who got sent home because they kept getting caught masturbating, and they'd lie about why they came home. I mean, all kinds of shit that it's like you have to feign enthusiasm always.
So how do you how do you advance in the Mormon Church?
There's no way that you can, like, there's no like checklist. As far as getting the priesthood, that just happens at certain ages. But as far as like if you want to make it all the way up to apostle or prophet, you just have to keep being really faithful and enthusiastic. And depending on where you live, like there are places in Utah that the whole congregation are people who could be bishops anywhere, but because they all live there, they can't all be bishops. So my dad, for example, very enthusiastic, was a seminary teacher, really good at indoctrinating people, really good at teaching people what to say, really good at making people feel like everything makes sense, because my dad is good at appearing skeptical, but with his religion isn't. And he has several times been a bishop. He's several times been in stake presidencies, and he's held high callings in the church, never all the way up to 70. And now that his kids are all turning atheist, I doubt he'll ever make it there. Probably.
Yeah, that probably. Now, do Mormons shun, not like the Amish or the Jehovah's Witnesses, but do they shun you somewhat?
Yeah. So especially when you first leave, and if you, so first of all, if you are ever at all critical, your friends list will just drop. But it's more of a social expectation, because Mormons are taught that when you leave the church, you're actually miserable and you're in bed with Satan, and that you have to stay away from those people. But it's not an official, like, this person has left the church, now shun them. They'll also try and get you back if they can, if they see the opening, but yeah, it is a socially pressured shunning. And I mean, there's all kinds of things. Like, you could have known somebody your whole life and fallen in love with that person, and if they leave the church to a Mormon, they are now off limits for the possibility of dating and marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mormonism is kind of kooky, man. It's definitely kind of kooky.
Yeah,
now,
it is.
Only certain people are allowed into the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
How did they decide who them people are?
So that's one of the functions the bishop does, and the stake president to a high as well. You have to go through an interview with the bishop and the stake president periodically. I think it's every 3 years. It might be every year, but to get a temple recommended to keep it. And they do a worthiness interview, like, are you touching yourselves? All kinds of shit that they shoot to that a person never ask another person. Huh?
Like anybody admit that anyway, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, the temple's full of liars. Those people jerked off that right before coming in.
Right.
So yeah, so that's how the temple, you have to pass a worthiness interview, and then they'll talk about like how devoted you are to the church and what you're doing, and like, are you reading your scriptures and blah, 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 to make sure that you are good and in. Because the moment they detect doubts, they're going to start taking privileges away from you, all the way up to not allowing you to take the sacrament, which means when the sacrament comes in front of you, you have to wave it off, which is something that everyone notices and talks about. And it is, again, a social thing that fucking, it's a big deal. And so there are all of these ways where it's like, don't have doubts, because the moment they're detected, you're going to be fucked. So yeah.
I got one more Mormon question. We'll go on, and then we'll go on to some other things.
Cool.
As a Mormon growing up, and people on missionary work, are they discouraged from having non-Mormon friends?
No, because they're encouraged to have lots of good, faithful Mormon friends, and make sure that you're surrounding yourself with good Mormons. But you're definitely not discouraged from having. You're discouraged from having like friends who are bad influences or whatever, according to them.
Right.
But the whole point would be make friends and then turn them Mormon too. I mean, and with girls have the flirt to convert, where we might be able to date, but you got to come to church and then you got to get baptized and da, da, da. That's not an official doctrine of the church. It's just so fucking widespread. It may as well be where they will use what is very obviously their sexuality to trick a guy into becoming Mormon. So it's, you aren't discouraged, but you're encouraged to make Mormonism at least. Yeah, you can have non-Mormon friends as long as your friendship is strongly anchored in Mormonism. And
you probably should be proselytizing to them too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Always
inviting them to church dances and showing them the fun side, and then slowly bringing them into like a sacrament meeting in a Sunday school, and see, we're not so scary. And and then you get baptized, not having heard even 10% of the actual story. You hear the romanticized Joseph Smith story.
Yeah. I guess I do have one more Mormon question. What do you think? Do you think there would have been any differences if Joseph Smith wouldn't have been murdered at Nauvoo and Brigham Young?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do. First of all, I think he would have become more strongly established that he absolutely wanted his son to take over the church. Instead, Brigham Young ends up kind of hostilely taking it over. His son goes and tries to, and ends up forming a new religion, and it ends up being called the Restored or Reformed. I can't remember what it's called anymore. It started with an R, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's where his wife and family all go.
Uh-huh.
And Brigham Young ends up, the church that catches on and becomes mainstream, he ends up taking over. Not mainstream, but bigger. I wouldn't say Mormons are exactly mainstream now either, but even so it's yeah, I think there would have been large differences. I hope the biggest difference is the longer a person is in the sunlight, the longer they can be exposed. And there were already people who were in his inner circle and closest to him that had left the church, that had rebuked the church. His second in command, Oliver Cowdery, left the church, but never rebuked it, as they say, even though he was critical. And the reason why he didn't is because to rebuke it, he would have had to admit all the people he conned, because Oliver Cowdery is very likely the second author of the Book of Mormon, and certainly the person who came up with the ideas for the Book of Mormon.
Was he
Um,
one of the people that was supposedly witnessed the
yeah,
angel come down?
yeah, he was one of the
Okay,
supposed witnesses.
okay. So when you first okay, you decided you were an atheist.
Yep.
So how did you dip your toes into the water? Like what did you start studying first?
Yeah, so science, this is what I always say, like science got me to Mormons and science, actually learning about Mormon history and science itself got me to atheism. From once I was already atheist, I was pretty passive about it for a long time, especially while I was hidden, and then I started listening to like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, and Christopher Hitchens especially is still my spirit animal.
Me
But
too.
it
I
was
missed the hitch.
so much, and I never got to interact with him in any way while he was still alive, unfortunately. But um, yeah, I mean, I was very, so it was kind of like I became atheist. I realized that it was probably all bullshit. I probably called myself agnostic for a while, not realizing what the term actually means. I'm sure I went a little deistic every now and then too.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, they kind of solidified full on atheism for me. And then shows like the Atheist Experience encouraged me to become an actual activist about my atheism.
Yeah, I still consider myself an agnostic atheist because it would be
Yeah,
disingenuous of me to say that I know for sure because I don't.
I am an
I mean,
agnostic atheist too. I was using the word agnostic incorrectly to think you are
oh,
agnostic or
okay. Like
atheist.
the way that Christians think the
Yeah.
word agnostic means.
I do
Okay,
have some strong atheist leanings, but
me
I
too.
consider myself, yeah.
Me too. I mean, but I'm not gonna. I mean, there's just that sliver of a chance. I mean, I don't ever think about that. I don't think it'll ever happen, but it would be disingenuous of me to say that there's no chance that
Right.
there's some
I
some
won't
kind
say
of being.
I won't say absolutely it's impossible there is no God. I will say there is enough absence and enough that we know about the universe for a reasonable person to conclude that it is likely there is no God.
Right. It's highly improbable.
Yep.
Highly improbable. So,
Totes.
so after you got, you went through Dawkins and Hitchens. I'm sure you
Mhm.
checked out Daniel Dennett as well.
Yep.
Um, who were some of the first YouTubers you started watching besides the Atheist Experience?
Yeah.
Obviously.
So before he went more, so Armored Skeptic used to be a lot more about atheist stuff. Now he's more
Yeah.
about like social stuff and being an anti-social justice warrior, which is fine. You know,
He's starting to switch back now, thankfully.
I hope so, because that's where I liked him more. It's kind of like he was empowering people. It's like I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what he was saying, but he doesn't realize he's also in, this is going much further to empower shitty people than it is to actually resist the people that you're trying to resist. So
Right. There's a time and place for everything.
yeah. And you can tie it in, you can do it occasionally, but having it so focused on that made me lose interest in him because it's just not something that interests me. I'm pretty anti SJW myself, but I do it by just I don't do it by going after any individual and making
Right.
that my channel. I just say what I want to say. And then
Right.
if somebody says that's offensive, I fucking make them take that to its conclusion and prove it.
I refuse to be politically labeled, but if I had to label myself politically, I would
Mhm.
say probably a classic liberal.
Yeah, I'm very liberal myself.
You know, I'm pretty liberal on social issues, but I'm a
Yeah.
little more conservative on economic issues.
Here's why I'm not. Here's why I'm not conservative on fiscal and economic issues. And there's a couple of reasons. And so this is me trying to take everything and always apply the logic and reason. And so I'm not going to talk about the specific policies. I'm going to talk about why I go for more liberal positions, especially on things like welfare and such. The first thing is because we can. We are a super, super rich country, and nobody needs to go without food, shelter, or medical care. But that's not limited to just they can eat, they can sleep in dry conditions. They should also be able to do so comfortably.
Right.
You shouldn't have to be scared of where you're sleeping, and you shouldn't have to eat shit because we are so obscenely rich we could. But the bigger thing is 20 years from now, there's no jobs for anybody left because AI will be better than all of us at everything, period.
Right.
Full stop. New paragraph. I am including things like art and I am an artist for a living. And people just resist that because they're like, but art has the human experience. But as a consumer goes, as far as jobs go, which is what we're talking about, they will be able to produce much more consumed artwork than any human being.
Yeah, they don't care about the love, sweat, and tears that went into that art you're producing.
So we have, I mean, I met the guy who made this Carmen Sandiego, Where's Waldo, fucking Boba Fett painting picture behind me. And I don't remember his face or a thing about him. The biggest thing is we are 2 decades from no more jobs for anybody. And Piggy, I'm going to respond to that here in a second. So we have an economic disaster coming, and we need to get ahead of it by being much more liberal and just accepting that with no jobs, that means no money. So we need to be experimenting with universal income and just a new system of life where if you want something or need something, you just get it, because income won't matter anymore. Work won't matter anymore. So we're going to have to figure out the way to make the human condition still a positive thing and how to live in that world. And I'm not saying tomorrow, let's give everybody everything for free, but we need to be transitioning, and we need to acknowledge everybody's right to food, shelter, healthcare, and comfort. I mean, and I do think comfort is a right.
That's a very enlightened way of looking at it. And it made me think about that. And I think I do agree with you on most of that. The only thing I think that we should do, though, is I do see a lot of people abusing the welfare system. And
so what?
I don't know. It's just, it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, that's unfair to the taxpayers, though.
Is it? So here's my point. Yes, it's unfair to the taxpayer because the tax system is completely unbalanced. But when people talk about abusers of the welfare program, you're usually talking about people who come from poverty. And you're talking about people who were assigned to poverty because they were born into poverty and because of old, very old racist institutions. So when I hear a person complain about a person abusing, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the people who get impassioned and angry about a black person, for example, abusing welfare, when I go, they were born into a system that works completely against them. So what you're wanting to tell me is with all of this obscene wealth, if they want to abuse welfare, which at the best gets them food and a shitty place to live, I don't give a fuck.
Well, I mean, I see white people doing it too. I didn't want to, the race had nothing to do with it, but I'm talking about the ones that are living on welfare and then blowing their food stamps that should be feeding their kids.
Yeah,
like drugs.
That's child abuse. That's not welfare abuse. That's child abuse.
Well, I mean, it's abuse in general, but I'm just saying they're abusing the system. When they could very well be. I mean, like you said,
as the system exists, I agree that they are technically abusing it. I don't care. We need a new system that just says everybody gets comfort, food, shelter, healthcare, and then go from there. I agree that the people who are blowing it on themselves, that's stupid. I'm worried about the tax system. I'm not worried about that being a waste of tax dollars. But we do need a more balanced system where rich people are even fucking paying taxes, for sure.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Perfect sense.
I want to reply to Piggle if I can real quick.
Oh, go ahead, man.
Piggle said, I'd say curse Mormonism, not Mormons, as most are nice people. I agree on the sentiment of never attack the individual. However, as most are nice people know that it is a facade and it is something programmed, and they are told to learn it, and they are taught it, how to always present this being completely nice. Know that their private thoughts about you, even while they think are kind, are not. And they are things along the lines of, you don't have the whole truth, so you're not a whole person, and you don't know real happiness, and you don't know real enlightenment. And so you can never, anything you ever do wrong is sourced in you not being Mormon. Because if you had the truth, you couldn't do any wrong, even though they largely all do a lot of wrong. So there is a lot of passive aggressivism behind what you think are nice Mormons. Anyway.
Fair enough. And so who are some of the other YouTubers that you watched, besides, Armored Skeptic,
to tell you the truth,
that made you want to start making videos, like, hey, I want to do this.
I wasn't much of a YouTuber, except being so the funny thing is as far as being a YouTuber goes, to become a YouTuber, I was far more influenced by people like Philip DeFranco than I was atheist YouTubers. But I was more of a reader. I did love watching debates on YouTube, but those aren't the only sources. Those are usually replayed from actual channels. And Casey Atheist, it's not a big deal if you don't agree with me entirely on politics. This is the whole thing. My biggest thing is we just need a new system because the current system does not give everybody what they want. And yeah, I don't really give a shit if people quote unquote abuse welfare from a system that was abusing them far more.
Yeah, for years and years, and I don't want to. I mean, yes, there is racism still, but I would say that's more classism than anything, because poor white trash are looked at by the police just as they would a black guy. I mean,
yeah, I don't think I agree with that.
Growing up in that area, growing up around that kind of people,
Yeah.
I've seen, poor white people get treated just as badly by police as black people are.
Once the police have showed up, maybe I agree with that. As far as where police decide to target for patrolling, even though black people don't.
Yeah, you're probably right about that.
And black people don't commit crimes at a higher rate than white people, and it's just that they are patrolled more. And I don't think there's any way to deny racism in America if you are aware of the prison statistics in general. And then also keep in mind that Republicans have a history of voter suppression. And so very racist policies, because black people rarely vote Republican, very racist policies that encourage arresting and incarcerating black people benefit them very much, because you take away their right to vote, regardless of if that should be okay, even if it's a non-violent crime or a crime that should matter in any way. Right. So it's yeah.
That even goes into the court system, because a black person normally wouldn't be able to afford their own attorney, but a white person, their family is going to scrape together the money to get them an attorney instead of having a public defender.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, but I'm just saying that's the basic idea of it.
Because if you target impoverished black areas to pick up people, the people in those areas, regardless of if they themselves are actually black, because obviously there are poor white people who live there too, those people in general will not be able to afford anything and will have to be a public defender. The white people who enter the system don't enter as much from a targeted point of view. And so there's a wider variety of fiscal or financial situations. And so statistically, there will be a higher number of people who can afford attorneys.
That makes sense. So,
Mad Dodge Productions, I don't know whether to react to that as you disagreeing or agreeing.
Yeah, it's hard to say as Mad Dodge. So do you have anything in the works?
The new show for the atheist community of Austin. I'm now I'm in the family. I'm hoping I really get in the family and get to meet Matt Dillahunty and all those people. But yeah, it's Mad Dodge. You're still speaking too obscurely. I have no idea what you're asking me to react to or to further explain. So Atheist Community of Austin is picked up this show for me that we worked together to put together. It's called the Atheist Interviews, and yeah, okay, completely disagree with me.
This is America. Woohoo!
Yeah.
America.
That's fine. I think you're wrong too. if racism and shit isn't obvious to you, I think you're not looking. I'm trying to speak to you from whatever place I exist. If I exist with privilege, I don't. Whatever. It's all good. I will say, as a white male who has grown up around lots of poor communities and met lots of poor people and have met lots of oppressed people, that yes, I do think I was born with privilege. Oh, I see. So straight cis male. I like how it's like you want to disagree, and I'm speaking in just terms and explaining my way out, and you just want to go with like just shitty language.
Yeah, that wasn't called for straight cis male. Come on.
Yeah. Congratulations. You've shown that you belong in the conversation and that your points are valid by using language that is ridiculous to try and make your point. Well done. You've countered my entire argument here, sir.
So besides the Texas atheist, what else are you still involved with Talk Heathen too?
Yeah, I mean, they're a member of the ACA as well, the Atheist Community of Austin. And
That's
we do a
kinda
lot
like
of stuff together.
that's like the baby brother of the Atheist Experience, right?
Yeah, basically. I mean,
Okay.
they record in the same studio, just a couple hours apart. Um, yeah. I mean, I see the rate at which they're growing and what they're doing is slightly different, and I actually think one day they'll be the big brother. But maybe that's just because they're my friends too. I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm really surprised of the atheist community in Texas. I mean, Texas is a pretty God-fearing state normally, isn't it?
Yeah, but Austin isn't. Austin's the Portland of Texas.
Okay, Austin's like college town kind of thing.
Yeah.
Younger thinkers and more
Straight
academia.
straight says Mel. Sorry, I'll be nice. I don't need you to be nice. Just if you're gonna counter it and disagree with substance. I don't. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Austin. Yeah, it's very liberal. Very. There's lots of non-religious people. It really is not the rest of Texas.
How do you come up with the ideas for your shows? Do you watch any like Christian or Mormon YouTubers and then like think
Yeah.
of responses or?
So, dear Mr. Atheist, honestly, I just sit down and I think about questions I've been asked that were stupid, and so
Right, because you were a Christian at one time, so you can think of them.
yeah.
Them
Well,
questions. You can
I
think
used
on both
to
sides
ask.
of the fence too.
Yeah, so yeah, questions I used to ask, but more specifically, like the questions that I have been asked since becoming atheist. So, I mean, the evolution one I ended up doing in direct response to the Josh Feuerstein video, which was so dumb. But it could have easily been, why are there still monkeys if we evolved from monkeys?
God, I hate that one.
Yeah, which my new
Why do they
response
always
is,
say monkeys when we actually evolved from apes? I don't think they understand the difference.
yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, we are apes, but like the sentence technically is the exact same in accuracy for me to say, why are there monkeys if we evolve from monkeys? If I were to say, why are there humans if monkeys evolved from humans, that literally has the same amount of accuracy. We
Right.
evolved
It
from
has no
monkeys.
substance.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah,
They're not correct. I mean, you already know that.
that's no substance.
Common
Yeah.
ancestor.
Yeah. Well, we've been going about an hour. I really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, it is.
If you'd like to plug your channel, tell them a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so my channel is Mr. Atheist. I have a Thursday show called Dear Mr. Atheist, where we answer the commonly posed questions to atheists that we've had to answer over and over and again, and are tired of answering on repetition. Through that channel, I try to illustrate things a little bit more. I use these caricatures that I build. You can see one of my caricatures, though this one's for the atheist interviews. Yeah, I just try and illustrate them and make them a little more interesting and hopefully a little funny. I have a Sunday show called Sunday Mass. That's my collab project. You'll see other YouTube content creators on there. Every week we have 2 to 3. This week we have 3. Next week I'm only doing 2 because provided they respond, the person who agreed to do next week is a larger personality, and I don't want to muck that up at all by having an additional. So I'll just have that person and then one other guy. But yeah, so that's my Sunday show. I don't know why I explained all of that about the stuff in the background. And then I do random stuff. I put out an episode yesterday or this morning, that was all about flat earth memes from this flat earth Facebook I found. I've been doing Talking with Theists. I have a separate channel now that's just starting called The Atheist Interviews. The first episode will be out this Friday, and I've interviewed Anthony Magnabosco, and the names that I have coming up for that are really exciting, but we're not announcing them until they are hard scheduled. But they are people that I am very excited to meet and have that conversation with.
That does sound interesting. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
So if I ever have just a bullshit stream where we're discussing stuff, and it's in the evening and it's not a Thursday or a Sunday, I'll be sure to invite you.
Dude, Thursdays and Sundays are still fine. Thursdays are when that show is scheduled. On Sunday, the show goes out live, but it's pre-recorded. However, I like to be in the live chat for that.
Yeah, I seen that last Sunday.
So there's no other than Sunday from 6 my time to 8 my time. I'm open pretty well. I can move other things around and fit things in, unless I have a client for my real job.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, the real jobs. Well, being an adult.
Wow. Yeah, I'm really hoping that I can transition this to my real job down the road.
I,
Straight
I'm,
Sith Mail,
I'm
did you have
hoping
anything mean you wanted to
I'm
say
hoping
before
I
I go?
die young, kind of.
Yeah. I don't want to die young. I want to blow up and then forget about everybody. That meme is.
All right. Well, you all have a lovely night, and I will talk to you later. I'll probably be going back over to Don's room in a minute here, so
I'm gonna
I'll
get a
probably
snack
see you guys there.
and then head there too.
All right. Later.
Peace.
All right.